And remember that and forgive them.
Yes.
Even Jesus himself taught that lesson when he was on the cross. Father, forgive them.
Amen.
They don't know what they're doing.
Amen.
And the people that persecute you and talk about you and treat you mean and treat you bad, just because that you're a Christian or because of where you go or how you act or how you conduct yourself, those kind of things that you feel are what God wants you to do, and they talk about you for that thing, just forgive them. Because they don't know what they're doing. They're not being led by the same Spirit that you're being led by. Because they don't know who sent him. Now, over in Matthew chapter 5, I'm going to read a couple here. You don't have to go unless you want to. He said, "Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my name's sake. Rejoice,
Amen.
and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you."
Amen.
If you live godly, you will suffer persecution.
Amen.
You will.
Amen.
It will happen. So, if we read where Paul was thrown in prison, we read where he was shipwrecked and beaten and burned and whipped and those things that happened to him. All those things happened to him, and at the time, no doubt it seemed grievous. And that when we go through things and things happen to us, automatically we think, well, we must have done something wrong because of all this trouble that's come to us. But don't always believe that.
Amen.
Don't always believe that the trouble and the things that are going on in your life are because that you did wrong. Examine yourselves.
Amen.
And see if you're in the faith.
Amen.
And if you can look at yourself, hey, well, I haven't done anything that caused all this, then rejoice.
Amen.
Amen.
Rejoice and be exceedingly glad.
Amen.
For great is your reward in heaven.
Yes.
But if you've got something that's wrong and you can look back at your life and see, hey, you know, I might have stepped off the path there.
Yeah.
Get another
Amen.
blood.
Amen.
Get forgiveness for it.
Yeah.
And you go on. Amen?
Amen.
But there are many trials and temptations that come to all men.
Amen.
Now, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to read a couple more, and then I'm going to close with a little statement here. We can go in Peter, we can go about trials, and we can talk about how being persecuted and being tempted. Over here in the book of James, chapter 1. Well, let me read this one right quick. Hebrews chapter 5. You can write these down and look them up when you get home if you want to. Verse 5 and verse 8, talking about Jesus, said, "Though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered." Now, Jesus, do you think, we're talking about Jesus now, had to learn obedience.
Come on.
I'm talking about Jesus now. I'm talking about Jesus. Had to learn to be obedient. And he learned this through the things that he suffered.
Amen.
Sometimes we suffer to learn obedience.
Amen.
You're right.
Because Jesus had to. And the disciple is not greater
Amen.
than his Lord.
Amen.
If they persecute me, they're going to persecute you.
Amen.
If I suffered, you're going to suffer.
Amen.
Now you think, well, I thought, he was perfect. He was perfect. Well, he was.
Amen.
But there ain't no suffering where he came from.
Come on.
You
Amen.
can't suffer in heaven.
Amen. Oh.
So when he came here, he had to learn obedience through suffering, like we did.
Amen.
So he learned those things through the things that he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation unto all men that obey him. So Jesus had to learn to be obedient through the things that he suffered. So if Jesus suffered and was persecuted, why do we believe that we won't have to suffer any persecution, any trials, any temptation, any heartaches? We think that when we get saved, that all the problems just vanish away. And all life is going to be wonderful and a bed of roses and just a great time now. And it's just the opposite of that.
Amen.
When you're on the devil's side, you know, he don't spend a whole lot of time picking on somebody he already has.
Amen.
He don't spend a whole lot of time chasing down people he already owns.
Amen.
But if he can get you discouraged, and if he can get you to fall away from, then that's what he's going to do.
Amen.
Now, I'm going to read one more thing here. In the book of Galatians, and then we're going. I'd like for you to write these down too when I get to this point. Chapter 4 says, "Now I say that an heir." Now we know that we are heirs of God, and we are joint heirs with Jesus.
Amen.
We know that when Jesus died, you know, when my grandfather died, the goods that he left here, and my grandmother, when they died, the goods that they owned and they had here was then split among the heirs, my dad and his family.
Right.
That was his inheritance. He inherited all those goods that they had worked for and purchased and bought their lives. You know, they sold them at auction and then split the money. You know, but they could have just easily split up the goods as well if they wanted to. If they could have, you know, most times you can't. You fight so much you don't know. That's mine. That's mine. That's mine. You know, so they decided to sell it and just split the money. But we have an inheritance through God, and we're joint heirs with Jesus.
Right.
Now, my dad, he's sitting here. He got his inheritance when his mother and father passed away. Well, when do you get your inheritance from God? When you get to heaven? You get your inheritance when the heir dies, not when you die. So you received your inheritance when Jesus died. So if you have an inheritance and it's yours, why aren't we living in that inheritance? Why aren't we enjoying the things that He paid for?
Come on, brother. Come on.
All His life He worked and paid for all this stuff for us.
Yeah.
And when He died, He gave it to us, but we don't receive it.
Come on, that's right.
That's the difference.
That's right.
So He said, as long as He said that an heir, as long as he is a child, differs nothing than a servant, though he's the Lord of all of it.
Amen.
So even though we're heirs of God, as long as we keep ourselves in that servitude, as long as we think that we're just a servant, as long as we're, say, a child, and we don't grow in God's knowledge, and we don't grow in things, we're going to remain on milk, and milk and cornbread, and soft food, and baby food. As long as we remain a child, though we own everything, we're no different than the slave. Even though you own it all. Even though anything that you, He said, everything that the Father has is mine, and I'll give it to you. And He said, ask anything in the Father's name, and He'll give it to you. Ask anything in my name, He'll give it to you. He said, but He's under tutors and governors until the time appointed of the Father. Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth His Son, made of a woman, made under the law. Now, God sent His Son, and now we have to learn, we have to grow in this. You know, a lot of people go to the churches that they go to because there's not much,